Coming out of Detroit and being poor, I just wanted money. I wanted all the nice things, I wanted the fancy car, and I didn't have a why. I just wanted what I didn't have. In California, I was doing sales. I went into one person's home and I'm going through their garage and there's a Bentley sitting there. And I don't know if maybe that was the first Bentley I'd ever seen, but I was like, what a beautiful car. And they said to me just so nonchalant, they're like, "Oh, yeah, we don't ever drive it." It was sitting there, dust on it. And they're like, "Yeah, we don't ever drive it." Life takes on different meaning and the financial freedom really starts to define itself. My son was growing up. He had prepared one time for a school activity, and it was just him and I in California. We practiced really hard, and we rehearsed really hard, and he was really, really wanting me to go to it. I went to my work and I said, "My son has an event. I'd like to be there for him." And they told me absolutely not. I was faced with losing my job and going to watch my son, or not seeing my son and not being there for him when he really was wanting me to. He was something he really put a lot into. And, I had to choose keeping my job. That's what financial freedom gives you, the ability to be with your family, to be able to be where you want, when you want. It's not about the fancy cars and the fancy things. It's really, really about being able to have your time on your rules.
You are listening to the 5 a.m. podcast, and today is your day. Welcome to the 5 a.m. podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Michael Clausen. Today, we have a truly inspiring guest whose story proves that financial freedom is possible, no matter your starting position. David Webb, better known as the No Money Millionaire, went from being broke to building a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio without ever using his own money. His journey is a testament to breaking limiting beliefs, mastering mindset, and leveraging creative financing strategies to create lasting wealth. Now, David's message is clear and powerful. No money, no excuses. He teaches everyday people how to overcome obstacles, take actionable steps towards financial independence through real estate investing. So whether you're starting out or you're feeling stuck or you're listening into the 5 a.m. podcast to find some light at the end of the tunnel that's not a locomotive, David's practical insights and gritty authenticity will motivate you to rethink what's possible. Now, just before I welcome David to the show, I'm asking you to please share this with 3 of your friends. I know that many are going to enjoy and profit from today's conversation. And now, David, welcome to the 5 a.m. podcast.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, it is great. The pleasure is mine. I love hearing about those stories of going from rock bottom to some mountaintop heights. And of course, I do love talking about investing in real estate and finding that diamond in the rough, which I'm sure that you've encountered a lot of in your life and in your real estate investing. But your story is an incredible one, from that rock bottom that we talked about to that multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. Can you share that defining moment that really sparked your transformation?
I did, without even knowing, I did no money deals. And like I just said, I didn't even know what I was doing.
Okay.
I stumbled into them, and even after doing them, I hadn't realized what I had done. I did my first no money deal. It was in the 90s. And then about 10 years later, I did another one. And again, I just stumbled into those and didn't know what I was doing. It just happened that's what presented itself. But even after that second one, I was still grinding, thinking that I had to have all of the set traditional pieces. Thought I had to have the down payment, that my credit right, that my, get all my taxes up to date to submit, 3 years taxes. I thought I had to have all of that. Even after doing 2 no money deals, I still thought the traditional beliefs that I had to have these pieces. And so it took another 10 years after that before it all finally started to come together. And I realized what I had done and what now I can do. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Yes. Now, I know it's not too good to be true because of the experience that my wife and I have had in real estate. And some other friends too that work in real estate. So before we get into the nuts and bolts and things, did you have to have a little bit of a mindset shift in your journey in order to get some success at this?
The mindset is probably the biggest aspect to be able to do it. Just like you said, it sounds too good to be true, but you yourself know that it's
Mhm.
not. But a lot of people don't know that it's not, and in their mind, it is too good to be true, and that prevents them from even attempting it. I'll tell you myself. I told you I stumbled into those two deals.
Mm.
Well, my second one, it was 2008 or 2007, right around the bubble when everybody was just getting homes and they were giving loans out like crazy.
Yes.
Someone came to me and said, "Dave, why don't you, buy a home?" And I said right then, I said, I couldn't buy no, I couldn't buy a home. And there was the mindset. I was turning myself down before I even tried. Someone
Mhm.
didn't have to deny me. I was denying myself just because of the way that I thought in my mind. And so, I know a lot of people. I'm from the inner city of Detroit. I grew up, with a single mother, on welfare, trying to raise two kids. And I went to Detroit public schools. And I know a lot of people that are still back in that environment and still working paycheck to paycheck, some making ends meet, some are not. I know people who, have retired and are on fixed income. And once they got on fixed income, now they really had to budget and, they had to make sure their utility bills didn't get too out of hand because then that took away from what they had to allot toward their food. And I know people that are facing that and, they know that's what's coming, but they still have the mindset that, it's not for them or they can't do it, or it's too good to be
Mhm.
true. It's not really as good as it sounds. All of these mindsets. And again, they're denying themselves before they even attempt it even to get denied by somebody else. And that's the first step. That's the first step that people have to overcome is just believing that it's even possible. I had someone that worked for me here recently, and she knows all the properties that I have. She worked at one of my properties, and she heard my book was coming out, and I talked about, the no money millionaire and buying properties without any money. And she knows what I have. And she said, "Oh, that doesn't even make any sense." And she's like,
Mhm.
"How would somebody just give you their property without any money?" And so even knowing me, even knowing, she's working at one of my properties, she was still of the mindset that that doesn't even make sense. So the mindset is probably the biggest point.
Yes. And then there's those little foxes that break in through the wall around our delightful grain field or whatever it might be. But those little foxes come in and they might say, "Man, I that's too good to be true. I don't have the credit rating. I don't have any money saved up." And there's other things too, like somebody might be saying, "Oh, it's saturated. The market's got to be saturated.
Yeah,
There's got to be way too many people already doing this. I'm going to be Larry late to the party." What do you say to those people who are essentially making up adversaries
sure.
to them getting ahead?
Sure. Well, I had to overcome that myself. Fortunately for me, I've been a reader my whole life, and I don't know how this book presented itself to me. I found it, and it's one of those things like when the time is right, it will
Yes.
come to you, and it did. It was a book called The Science of Getting Rich. It's a book that was written in like the early 90s, I think before 1910, and I found it for free online. And it's not so much about monetary riches, it's
Mhm.
really about life enrichment. And in that, it teaches about two different mindsets. You have a competitive mindset, or you can have the creative mindset. You can have the competitive mindset, like you're saying, that the market's saturated and, everyone, all the good deals are gone and I'm coming in too late. Or you can have the creative mindset and know that you're going to create what you need. And I believe we've been given the power. And this book really helped me with that. I believe we've been bestowed the power to be able to be this
Mhm.
creator and be able to create what we want. Just stay focused, keep your mind, set on what you're after, and just stay wholesome in your belief
Yeah.
that you will be able to create what you're after. And that book was huge to me, and it really helped change and help me to understand the two different mindsets about going from the competitive mindset, the pie only has so many
Yes.
pieces, to where I'm going to create my own pie and I don't have to worry about that. And so that alone has been huge to me. And that's what I try to explain to people.
Yes. It's wonderful. And I love that book that William Waddles.
Yeah.
knew what was up.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
coming from a Christian perspective, growing up in the church, you get a lot of different mindsets and opinions and commands and ideas of what your life should look like. But
Sure.
you mentioned the word create. And
Yes.
so, in my point of view, we had a creator that created us to be fruitful and multiply. And so, if somebody
Exactly.
tells you that it is not in your future to be fruitful and multiply, well, let's just say that your creator already put that into your DNA
Yeah, of
that
course.
that you will be fruitful and multiply. And I just that the science of getting rich. I believe that's the book, right?
It
By
is.
yeah, by
It
William
is.
Waddles. Ladies and gentlemen, wouldn't you know it? It is free. Yeah, you just type
Yeah.
that into the Googles or whatever you like to search the interwebs with, and it'll come up for free. And
Yeah.
you can read that book to your heart's content. And I think it will actually make some of your heart's content because
Sure.
there's so many of us that are trained to be the good worker bee right from school.
Right.
If you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, we hear
Exactly.
that, man, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter which school system you're in, but you are trained to respond to those bells
Yes.
and to be the best memorizer. I wasn't good at memorizing. I could take in knowledge. My ear gate and eye gate were working just fine, but the way they design those tests and papers and things like that just wasn't always in Michael's favor. What can I say? It's a tale as old as time. But you must have had some tough adversities that you've faced during this time. Can you talk a little bit about how those adversities actually shaped your approach to business and to life?
Well, I struggled. My path is, but I never quit. It's been, I was a single parent. And so I grew up, like I said, in the inner city of Detroit and Detroit public schools and all of that. And I didn't want my son to do that. And so I said, I'm going to move you to California. I didn't know, we didn't have family there. I had never visited there. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew, growing up, everything was about like sunny California. And,
Yeah.
and so I just picked a spot and I just moved out there. But, it was difficult. It was difficult to make it in California. It was cost of living was way higher, so I didn't have work waiting for me. I had to go out there and find work and I didn't know about California. I didn't know about wealth or any of that. And I moved to Palm Springs. And the reason I chose Palm Springs was because at the time it used to be a spring break. And I thought, well, that's got to be a nice area. If it's a
Yeah.
spring break area, it's got to be nice. It's got to be better than Detroit. And so I chose that. Well, I didn't know about it being the desert and the affluence that was there and the snowbirds, and I didn't know about that type of life.
Yeah.
And so they would leave in the summer, and I was a all commission salesperson, and so they would leave in the summer and the stores would close. They would shut down for the summer. And here I was stuck having to live off of commission sales to places that were closed. And so every year I was fortunate that my son would go back to Detroit and visit his family, his mother and my mother and the other family members, because I was getting behind in my bills during the summer. And by the time he was coming back, which was 3 months or so later, I was being evicted. And so every time he returned to a new home. He didn't know why. He was young. He didn't know. And thank God that was the case. But it was cheaper for me to find a new place to move into than it was to catch up how far I had gotten behind. I've been evicted at least over 15 times throughout my life. And one of the times I had to move was because the utility bill got so high that I couldn't pay it. They shut it off. I eventually had to move and get a new house before they'd ever even turn the utilities back on. So when we lived in that house, we had to live in it with no utilities. My son would come home from school and there was no electricity. He'd have to wait for me to get home from work so I could connect the inverter to my car and then run the extension cords through the house so he could have lights and television. And he'd have to just sit there in the silence and, with no lights on until I came home. So, you know, it was tough.
Yeah.
I went through a lot. But what that taught me, I never gave up. And it just taught me perseverance, just relentless in my efforts. And a lot of that, it just developed. It kind of like what it's like battle, what do they say? You get hardened in battle,
That's right.
and that kind of what it did. It just strengthened me. And, I just, like I said, I've always read. I just continued reading. I wanted to be in real estate. I didn't know how to be in real estate. I had done the 2 no money deals, still didn't realize what I had done, and
Okay.
so I was still trying to get the traditional pieces, but what I really think from the adversity that I experienced was just to be able to, persevere, to keep
Yeah.
my head down and just keep pushing forward.
Yes, because you knew the brighter day was coming. And,
Yeah,
as you're talking, I'm thinking about Sylvester Stallone, shopping around that manuscript Rocky.
sure. Yeah,
And
yeah,
man, as I've mentioned
yeah,
before on the show, he had to sell his dog, ladies and gentlemen.
right,
Like he sold his dog, his
yeah,
big dog that he loved. He
yeah,
eventually got the dog back. But can you imagine that, ladies and gentlemen? What
yeah,
are you willing to part with to make your dreams come true? And so often we talk about common inputs, common activities yield common results, but uncommon activities yield uncommon results. And I know all of us could use some uncommon financial results and other things like that in our lives. But David, I want to ask you, can you explain a little bit in practical terms how people can actually get into real estate deals without using any of their own money?
sure. I'll tell you a couple that, like I told you the first 2 that I did. The
Hmm.
first one I stumbled into, I was young. I don't even know if I was employed at the time. I don't think I was. I was visiting my father, and he said, well, "I'm selling the home," and that was the house that I was in as a child. And I said, "Well, I want to buy it," and he laughed at me. He was like, "What a joke!" He was like, "How are you going to buy the house?" And I said, "Well, I want to buy it." And I didn't know anything about buying a house. I had never bought a home before. I didn't really know anyone that owned a home other than like my father. No other people in my area really were homeowners. And so I just went to the yellow pages. And if anybody knows what those are, I just
Yes.
went to the yellow pages and I went to mortgage lending and I didn't know. I didn't know what I was going to encounter. And so I picked up the phone and I was just calling one after the next. And, they were laughing at me, but kind of irritated. Like, why are you even wasting our time? Because they'd say, "Do you have a down payment? Do you have good credit?" And I was like, "No, I don't. I don't have any of that." And so they're like, "Why are you wasting our time for?" And I just didn't stop. And I don't know why. I don't know why I thought I was gonna hear, what I was looking for after I got the 10th rejection, the
Yeah.
12th rejection, but eventually I did, and I heard someone say, "Okay, well, let's figure it out, let's try." And he was open to creative structures, and he said, "Let's see what we can do here." He said, "So you're gonna need a couple pieces. You're gonna need, A and B to get C. So you need the down payment, you need the credit. Let's figure out how to make it happen." So he helped me since it was my father selling the house. My father was able, since he owned the house, my father was able to gift equity to me that I could then in turn use as my down payment.
Mm.
And then he said, "Okay, so you have your down payment covered." He said, "Now, what do you think about credit? Do you think you can partner with somebody that might have the credit that you could bring in?" I said, "Well, I have an older brother and maybe I can ask him." And so I asked my brother, I said, "Do you want to partner with me to buy dad's house?" And so my brother was like, "Sure, let's do it." And so my father, since it was us going to buy the home, he said, "Okay, I was going to ask at this time it was 80,000." He said, "But
Mm.
since you two are going to buy it, I'll sell it to you for 60." So my brother and I agreed with the lender. The lender told us, about this. My brother and I agreed to go ahead and do the loan still at the 80. So here we went in. I didn't have a job. I didn't have my credit. I didn't have, any tax W-2s or anything.
Yeah.
My brother came in as my partner. We went in with no money out of pocket. We walked out with $20,000 that we both split, came out with 10,000 apiece. So that was one aspect. Another one, my second one, someone told me, I could buy a house and I was denying myself before I tried. I just always would just browse Craigslist. And I just was looking on Craigslist and I saw owner finance. And the house needed some repairs and it wouldn't have qualified for traditional loans. So the seller had to be open for some creative structures because he couldn't sell it traditionally. So he only wanted 1,500 up front. So I had the $1,500 and then, the house was mine without a credit check, without any significant down payment or anything. And so that was a seller finance deal. So that was the second one. I know someone here just recently now is following my method. He needed to move. He was a renter. He needed to move, and he had 4 dogs, and it was gonna be almost impossible for him to find someone who wanted to rent to him. And so I said, "Why don't you try to find something you can own?" And same thing, he's like, "I'm not in a position. I don't have credit, down payment." And I said, "But you know my method. You work with me. Let's see what we can do." And he found a seller finance that allowed him to do some repairs to the property in place for his down payment. And it was a triplex. 2 of the units was occupied. The third was vacant. He was going to move into the third. When he closed, which was on the first of the month, he closed the other 2. He went in with no money out of pocket. He did some repairs for the down payment. The other 2 units was paying him rent the day he closed. So he went in with no money, collected rent, and was living for free. So those are just some of the ways that I've done it with no capital, with no credit.
Thanks for watching the show. Just a reminder that you can get all of our resources, other episodes, and read our blog posts at 5ampodcast.com. 5am Podcast is brought to you in part by mkci.ca, a certified member of the Autodesk Developer Network. MKCI helps companies maximize their AutoCAD, Inventor, Navisworks, and other design software investments. Their innovative products like the CommandSys script editor and the Clash Management Suite will streamline your workflow and boost your productivity. Visit mkci.ca today to discover how they can enhance your competitive CAD advantage. That's mkci.ca. Thank you for your support of 5am Podcast. It's so fascinating to hear. There's so much marketing around us.
Yeah.
We think, well, no, it can't be that. It can't be X, Y, and Z if we hear A, B, and C.
Yeah.
And of course, the Jackson 5 would tell us, hey, it's easy as ABC, 1, 2, 3.
ABC.
Speaking of
Right.
Motown,
That's right.
ladies and gentlemen, we need this mind renewal and get rid of that stinking thinking that, I mean, we just have it because it's like programmed into us by
Yes.
teachers and parents and friends and aunts and uncles. And I mean, who here listening has not heard, oh, you can't do that. That's just dumb. We're looking for that diamond in the rough. We're looking to think outside of the box. And we're looking to say, well, let me just push the envelope a little bit. And I would say pushing the envelope is easier than pushing a string. So I want to ask you then, we hear a lot about wholesaling real estate. And is this kind of something that you get into in your books and your training courses?
I mentioned it that, about wholesaling. It's not an area that I work with.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm more about, I work on fix and flips. I work on buy and hold multifamilies, apartments, renovating my property's value add. Wholesaling is definitely an aspect, but I lean heavy into the areas that I work in myself.
Right. Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. And ladies and gentlemen, you just heard right in David's brief answer that multi-unit and multi-story buildings. And here is this investment portfolio that exists because David knew he could do something. And he had that encouragement, maybe from that number 10 mortgage broker.
Sure.
I mean, can you believe? And hats off to you, David, for filing the nose in the trash bin.
Right.
And being able to say, no, I mean, man, there's somebody out there. There's a little spark of faith in my heart. And I'm like, I'm going for it because there's someone that's going to say yes. And perhaps, and of course, David's had to do a lot of cold calling, I'm sure, in his life, being in commission sales.
Sure.
And sometimes you're like, okay, well, he was a no, but we're just knocking off the $250 because I know I got to talk to 10 people before I get a yes. And that sale is going to be worth $2,500 to me, just for some simple math for the right brain people in the audience here today. So for somebody who's listening and their curiosity is piqued, and there some faith and some hope is building inside their internal furnace, what would be their very first step to getting started, dipping their toe into that Palm Springs pool of real estate investing?
Well, I work with each people individually because you really got to look at your own situation. Some people are like the level that I've been, where I've been like below zero. And so if you're there, and I help people with that, Wholesaling is one aspect where it doesn't really take much. You find a good deal, you can present it, wholesale it, make a little money off of it, fix and flips. And
Mhm.
that's where I have somebody here local with me that I'm helping him start with doing fix and flips. He needs to get his taxes right. He needs to fix his credit. And he doesn't have any relationship with a bank. And so I told him, let's start doing some fix and flips.
Mhm.
That way you can start putting money in the bank, start building that relationship, start getting some money, start paying your credit, start getting things fixed because then eventually you'll be able to move to the bigger, better pieces because
Yeah.
ultimately you want to work with the banks and start using bank money because they're your favorable rates. So there's that one. Or if somebody has capital, and I have somebody that I'm working with right now, they had capital, they just didn't know what to do with it. And so then I showed them, okay, so you can put it in here. Do you want to put it into a multifamily, like we've already mentioned, and just start getting, income, passive income coming in every month off your money? Do you want to put it into a home that you can, try to buy it low and sell it, at a profit and start just getting the larger chunks? I myself try not to do the fix and flips as much
Mm.
because I learned the hard way. I had something that I did really well with, and this was my intro. Again, I was learning as I go, and
Yeah.
I learned about capital gains taxes, and I lost like a big, and I was in California at the time. So on
Oh.
top of the 20%
Mhm.
federal tax, California had theirs on top of it. And, I gave away almost like 30% of my money that I made. And so the fix and flips, I try not to do so much of. I like the long-term hold strategies, and there's other tax benefits that you can do, still get your money out of it, tax hits that you do. Anyways, that's a little deep, but just different
Yeah.
ways. So if you have money, you can get in and structure different ways. Or if you don't have money, we can work with you in that regard and help you build it up and start taking care of what needs to.
Good. Okay, so curiosity peak level has just increased a little bit more. David, how can people get in touch with you?
Oh, well, I'm nomoneymillionaire.com and you can Google me. You can Google No Money Millionaire. You'll find me. I'm No Money Millionaire on Facebook, Instagram, the No Money Millionaire, LinkedIn, No Money Millionaire. But yeah, you can Google No Money Millionaire. You'll find me.
Oh, that's great. So, ladies and gentlemen, just to support what David is saying, I mean, sometimes you got to start with the fix and flip, and you're not building the Taj Mahal for anybody. You're putting
Right.
some lipstick on it, and
Exactly.
you're not building to your dreams. You're building to sell. And I know oftentimes in the past, my wife and I are buying a property, and our first thought is, okay, so what do we have to do to sell this thing? And,
Exactly.
we had a list and we would do some stuff, and it was one after the other. Fortunately, I had the skills to do construction work, and she had the design, and she had the ability through her father, and it was a great formula for us. And I know that if we can do it and if David can do it, then other people can do it as well. And
Sure.
the reason, ladies and gentlemen, that I'm giving you this little bit of a backstory on the fix and flip is because it is possible with the right team and the right people. And so sometimes you got to get a little, you got to add to your circle of friends and your circle of advisors. And then our perspective changes because of the new people that we're meeting and the new information that they're giving us. And so, David, one of the things that I know comes from real estate is financial freedom and some different financial perspective. Can you talk about what financial freedom means to you personally, and how do you maybe help others to define that financial freedom for themselves?
You know, Coming out of Detroit and being poor, I just wanted money. I wanted money. I wanted all the nice things. I wanted the fancy car. I wanted
Mhm.
all those things, and I didn't know. I didn't have a why, and I just wanted what I didn't have. And when I was in California, I was doing sales. There was two that stick with me, two instances. I went into one person's home, and I'm going through their garage. I used to sell construction and roofing and stuff in California. I walked through their garage, and there's a Bentley sitting there. And I don't know if maybe that was the first Bentley I'd ever seen, but I was like, what a beautiful car. And they said to me just so nonchalant, they're like, "Oh, yeah, we don't ever drive it." It was sitting there, dust on it. And they're like, "Yeah, we don't ever drive it." And another one, I was walking through a woman's garage, and I saw a Lamborghini sitting there. And same thing, just covered in dust. You could tell it hadn't been moved in forever. And I said, "Beautiful car." And they said, "Oh, it's our son's." And yeah, he doesn't ever drive it. And in my mind, I'm thinking, if I ever get the opportunity to get a car like that, I'm going to drive the wheels off that thing. It's going to be hard to get me out of that car. But, as I finally get to a point where I could afford those things, life takes on different meaning. And the financial freedom really starts to define itself. And when I was, growing up, when my son was growing up, he had prepared one time for a school activity, and it was just him and I in California. And he really he practiced really hard, and we rehearsed really hard, and he was really really wanted me to go to it. And so, I went to my work and I said, my son has an event and I'd like to be there for him. And they told me absolutely not. I was faced with losing my job and going to watch my son, or, not seeing my son and not being there for him when he really was wanting me to. He was something he really put a lot into. And, I had to choose keeping my job. And so that's what financial freedom gives you, the ability to be with your family, to be able to be where you want, when you want. Some people may be faced with a sick relative and they're faced with the same, situation at work. You can't just sometimes leave your job, but your family needs you and you're faced with maybe you're going to lose your job to go be where you need to be. And that's what financial freedom gives you, the ability to be able to be where you want, when you want, time with your family. It's not about the fancy cars and the fancy things. It's really, really about being able to have your time on your rules. And that's what it is for me.
Yes, and being able to say no to
Yeah.
those people like what you're just describing, those difficult people. Oh man,
Yeah.
I mean, who hasn't worked for a horrible boss? And
I've had plenty.
oh man, some of those guys that I've worked for in the past, you just think, how, dude? How are you just such a evil monster? I don't know
Yeah.
what else to describe some of these people as, but being able to have the ability, we'd like to say, take this job and shove it. Like I think it was Eddie Paycheck that wrote that song, and
Yeah.
then and then somebody comes asking for their portion of that paycheck that we just told them to shove. And so
Exactly.
that power to say, "No, it's okay, I got this," through a different source. If something was to happen, God forbid, that just evaporated what you had built, would there be 3 steps that you would say, "No problem, I got this. Here's my 3 steps to rebuilding my wealth."
Definitely. I just did a video on this. I just did a video. If I had to start from zero today, what would be the first steps I would take to get
Mm,
myself right back where I am? And they're just a couple really. You hear people say that, someone who's been successful that could start all over and become successful again. And, once you've learned how to do it, then, you just do it. And so the first couple steps that I tell people to do, and I advise this to anybody right now that's interested in real estate. Very first one I would do is I'd start getting active in my local real estate groups, Facebook, meetup groups, anything that's real estate investor, real estate minded. I would start doing that. And then, I would be active. I would introduce myself. I would, start commenting on people's posts and everything that I could to get myself out there. And from there, you start meeting people. And, the another thing that I would do is I'd start from those groups or other places as well, just Googling it or anything. I'd start finding people who did loans for what I need, like hard
mhm,
money loans,
mhm,
DSCR loans. That's a debt service coverage ratio loan that works with multifamilies. And I'd start introducing myself to them and saying, hey, this is what I want to do. What do I need to be able to present to you so that you would consider my deals? And
mhm.
they'll tell you, it needs to be like this. This is what I need. So they'll tell you what you need. So first you got to find the real estate groups, and on there you'll find wholesalers and people posting deals, realtors, different stuff that's off market. You'll start finding it on there. Then you reach out to your lenders and places that'll work with you without having, because some people can't go to the bank right away. And so you can do hard money loans and DSCR loans, look at the property and the income the property is producing more so than you personally. So these work more off of the property than you personally, the hard money and the DSCR loan. And then the third one I would do is I'd start getting active and finding people, that with money,
Mhm.
Chamber of Commerce, your Rotary clubs, your different groups, and I'd get out there. And because there's a lot of people who want to be invested and involved with real estate, but they don't have the time and they just can't be. So they're looking for someone who wants to be the real estate guy and they can put their capital to work. So those are the three components. You got to be able to find the deals, find the lenders, and find the private money. And from there
Mhm.
you can just go.
Yeah. And it really is, I think, taking the time to kind of survey the scene and making a list
Yeah.
and then start working that list or make a plan and work a plan, as has been said by by many people. How do you, from the people that come to you, how do you help people break through the limiting beliefs that are holding them back from pursuing these wealth building opportunities?
Some people, you know, Uh, I everybody has different levels to break through. Some of those walls are a lot harder than others. And so some, let's go to the extreme and some you can, just depends. If they have some capital and they want to put it to work for them, well, then they could come in maybe easily just as a small minor partner where, you kind of holding their hand through the deal and let them let them see it actually work, return come in, and then that helps them open up some more of their capital next time. And then eventually they're going to be like, okay, I see what you're doing. I've been part with a couple what you've done, and now let me try to do this on my own. Some others, you can, show them some of the deals that have been done, how it's been done, fix and flips. I work with people on all different layers and try to help them find if it's fix and flip, like you said, you
Mhm.
had experience where you could do some work yourself. I do my work myself as well. I have a couple guys that work for me and I call it renovation revenue. So when I come in and I look at a property, I then, figure out what the budget is going to be to bring this property up to, to the most value.
Mhm.
And in that budget, I pay myself to do the work that I do. So I
Yeah.
create myself. So I buy a property with no money out of pocket. And then in the budget, since I do the work, now what I do to do justice to the deal is I will get a couple bids as realistic as possible. And then I always come in well under even the lowest one. So I'm doing the job of justice. I
Mhm.
feel I'm going to give it the best work possible, but I take the least amount of any of the bids that I got because meeting the deadline, meeting the budget is the utmost importance. But
Yes.
you create revenue for yourself that way, right from the beginning. So I just work with everybody and we find out what they have, what role they can play, and we try to work the best for their situation.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. And it's a good perspective to have of the various income streams that you can get from start to finish of that project.
Sure.
And so are there some common myths about real estate investing that you might encounter in chatting with people and how do you debunk them?
Well, a lot of them, like we mentioned earlier about the market. You everyone watches the news and they hear
Mhm.
that, it's a bubble or
Yep.
things are priced too high. And a lot of those, you have to overcome. And again, with the signs of getting rich, I don't even worry about those. I really don't. I know I'm creating what I need and I stay faithful in that. And so far it hasn't let me down. And so, and with some of that, I show people some of my deals that I just did. I just
Mhm.
right now recently in this market, I found 9 homes for $1.1 million. I just did it all without a dollar out of my pocket, and I'm under contract right now on 5 of them already. And so, that I just show them that these are current deals that offset any of these beliefs that they're
Mhm.
listening to either on the news or what they read somewhere, and just said, listen, you got to stop reading and you got to start doing
Yes.
because they're here.
They are. And another book, going through it right now, I'm just about done, was recommended to me by a previous guest on the show, Liam Naden, and it's by Ken Roberts, The Rich Man's Secret.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you ever read that one, but
I have not.
that's another good one
Okay.
of just take the next step and then everything else, the next one will be revealed. Just take that next step. And then, there's a section in there too about blocking out the useless thoughts. So many of us will have thoughts from the past. We could look at the past as being dead, and the present hasn't happened yet. We only have today. And so there's no point in worrying about the past and no point in worrying about the future.
Sure.
And we're just taking that next step. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we're getting a lot of great next step opportunities in our chat with David. David, I want to ask you about balancing risk and reward when using these creative financial strategies. What have you encountered there with that kind of that?
I use other people's money, and so and what I can't stress on hard enough is that when you're using other people's money, I protect it, I treat it more so than my own, and
Mhm,
I make sure that everything is a success for my partners above and beyond. Anything that I do, I'm always last
mhm,
in the deal, and so with that being the case, you offset risk by being thorough, being as thorough as possible. Every aspect of it, making sure your renovation budget is as thorough as possible. You have room for overage in there. One of the things where people undercut a lot is time. They think it's going to be done a lot
mhm.
quicker than it is. They think it's going to sell a lot quicker than it is. And so you have to prepare for any of these contingencies. But the way that I offset risk is being thoroughly prepared and researched. And,
Mhm.
and that way, you're prepared. You're prepared for these things. But that's the two things I'll tell people about is you protect when anyone's giving you their money, you protect it above and beyond your own. And then to offset risk, you can't research, but you can't be too thorough. Be as
Yes.
prepared as possible.
Yes. Yeah, and we used to say, "Are we doing something that we would like?" And we don't have to love it, but would we live here by the time
Sure.
this is done? And I think another thing too, and this speaks to preparation, and because of what I was doing for work, I would kind of have I like to take my costs for, let's say we had to re-drywall or we had to paint or the plumber was going to have to get in. Sometimes that's kind of an oddball one because I'm not a plumber. I don't know all those ins and outs, but speaking to the research and the preparation, I could look in and say, okay, so if I know what my wall square footage is, I know how much this is going to cost me to paint. I know how much it's going to cost to re-drywall if we got to, rip some stuff out. And that just comes to studying so that we can kind of be approved for what's going on and the goals that we want to have. So
Sure.
I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about staying motivated and focused during like a challenging job, or maybe did I underbid a little bit? Am I spending too much time on this? That whole question of motivation and focus.
Again, going back to being prepared and being as thorough and prepared for contingencies, and you have to expect something's going to happen that's
Hmm.
unforeseen,
Yeah.
unprepared. But if you allotted for that, if you made some allowance for that, you can fall back on that and feel, "Hey, I kind of prepared, I put a cushion in here in case I ran into any of these things."
Hmm.
And one point that a little off, maybe a little bit from your question, but one thing I do want to stress, if you're ever using private money, other people's money, friends, family, anybody that's decided to trust you with their money, and if you're starting to encounter issues, the best thing you can do is tell them right up front. Tell
Hmm.
them up front what you're encountering and tell them your plan to offset it, but be as upfront as possible and as pretty much as quickly as possible. And you'll find people will respect that and they'll work with you through it because they'll
Hmm.
they'll they'll know that you stood up, you faced it, you said what it was, but you're showing, hey, this is how I'm going to remedy it, and this is how we're going to get through it. And you'll find people ride through that with you a lot better. So that's one thing I definitely want to stress on.
Yes. Oh, communication is key.
Yes.
Money
Yeah.
doesn't like surprises, and neither do people.
No. you
And
know.
so that's definitely words of wisdom right there, is to be up on our communication with everybody involved. I wanted to ask you your experience about working with investment banks. Does that influence your strategy? Has that changed since it was private money to investment bank type financing?
I use both right now with what I do. I use traditional, I use banks. I made a relationship. Your team is important. As you're developing, you start finding, when you find the right contractors, when you find your team. And my banker, is one of my team. And so I run stuff by him. He's more conservative. He's a banker. So he comes back with some of that angle. I'm more ambitious and optimistic. And so I'll run stuff by the banker to hear his take on it. And so I use my banker as a team, but I use traditional lending with private money because, the traditional lending usually want, 20% or what, down. And that's when I go and source private money to use that. And then also the renovation budget, I source private money and also traditional money. So I'm right now using traditional banks on most every project.
Right. So something that you were mentioning just in the last couple of answers caused me to think of the word honor and
Oh,
giving
sure.
honor to whom honor is due. Can you talk a little bit about maybe how you learned to honor the people that you were bringing into your projects, and has that changed for you, or was there some examples where honoring the people helping you really paid off for you?
One of the big steps for myself is, that started helping me move forward and become more successful was eliminating that ego.
Mm,
It's so easy when you're coming up and you've accomplished so much and you've came from zero and you're
yeah.
starting to develop and you're doing things well to kind of build an ego and think that you know everything and you can do this. And that only takes you so far. If you really want to excel, you really want to climb the ladder at a much better pace, it's going to take a team. And so there's no I in team. I think we've all heard that. And so the team is important and giving everybody the credit where the credit is due. Being humble and knocking the ego out, those are some big aspects to have in your team.
Yeah.
And so I do. I rely on my team heavily. I know what each of our strengths are, and and that's what it took to develop the team. When I see somebody and I see they have a strength, well, I want that in my group. And so I've learned to let everybody do, their area, what they're best at, and stick to what I'm best at. And so far it's been a good formula.
Yeah, that's great. And I know we've talked a lot about mindset already, and kind of mindset and money set, they certainly go together. But as we're getting to the end of our conversation, I want to give you the opportunity to speak to somebody that might be listening, in that their current circumstances don't define their financial future. And that just might be really hard for them to process.
Sure. Your current situation definitely doesn't define your possibilities for your future. I didn't get started in really, I didn't make my first $1 million until I was 50. And so I was just because I had to get super focused because I knew I had retirement coming at some point. And earlier in our show, I
Mhm.
talked about people that was going to be living on a fixed income, on Social Security and stuff like that. And, I had enough struggles through my life. I've worked very hard and I thought, I don't wanna be on Social Security or a fixed income and live less now than I worked so hard to do all of these years. So, I was like, "I really need to do something," and that's when I really started getting focused on changing my situation. I had just did the regular, jobs, working every day, come home from work, and try to relax to get ready to go back to work tomorrow, and I was like, "That has to change," and so I made that decision to change it. And, I tell people if all you do is go to work, because we have to work, when you're trying to get out of your situation, you have to work. Your working is keeping you where you're at. but then you have to do something above and beyond. You have to apply something toward what you're wanting to build for the future. You can't just work every day and work hard. Working hard doesn't get you there. Every,
Yeah,
contractor that you see on the
that's
side of the
right.
road would all be there. So it's not working hard because we all have to work, but it's like, what are you applying to changing your situation? And so, me, I read everything I could. I'd work all day. I'd come home. I'd read. I'd get the Robert Kiyosaki. I'd get,
Yes.
the Science of Getting Rich. I was reading everything I could to try to figure out how am I going to change my situation. So your current situation does not define your future. It's
Hmm.
it's what you do right now. Taking that first step you mentioned from that book,
Yeah.
and that was a video I just made. People buy books and people pay for courses and watch lots of videos. But if you don't take that first step, none of it's going to do you any good.
That's right.
And once you take the first one, then you're right. The second one shows itself. And then that's something much easier to take. And so is the fourth and the fifth. And so it's taking that first step. But you have to do something toward building your future.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard somebody say once, good news to the poor man is you don't have to be poor anymore.
Right.
All right. That's
Well, you
that's like
don't.
good news
You
to the
don't.
sick man is you don't have to be sick anymore.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so for people out there listening, they might want to know what's next for David. Or do you have some upcoming projects or some goals that you're excited about?
All of this, the book coming out is brand new, so I've just written a book called The No Money Millionaire: How to Build Wealth Through Real Estate Without Using a Dime of Your Own Money. And that's right now is, to any of your listeners, they can get that for free. They can go on my website at nomoneymillionaire.com, download it for free because, I know I'm trying to help people change their situation. And I don't want, them faced with not having the money for the book to be a deciding factor of not getting it. So the book is available for free. There's no reason not to get it and start learning and applying these things. And so this is a new direction for me. And, I'm getting ready to start doing more one-on-one coaching and mentoring and working with people because I spent all my life trying to get myself here. But now I know so many other people that need help and beyond like where I'm from, and that's across the entire country, that's like Detroit or places where I'm from. And that's now more rewarding. Watching other people. I just helped that person with the triplex.
Hmm.
Well, that person he had written off home ownership. He didn't think it was in his future. But now that he has it, he's already looking at his second property, and now I
Awesome.
know how that's gonna change his children's lives. Now they're gonna see him, he's gonna tell them differently, and now that's changing, not beyond from beyond him into different generations, and that's really, really rewarding, and so that's what's driving me now.
Awesome. Yes, breaking that cycle of poverty. There's
Yes.
a lot of generational curses out there, and
Yes.
for so many of them, it's that generational poverty.
And it's
And
tough.
yeah, it is tough. It is tough. And my hat's off to you for giving the book away and for helping people. And just
Thank
give
you.
us your website one more time.
Sure, it's nomoneymillionaire.com,
Good.
and again, you can Google "No Money Millionaire" and you'll find me.
Well, David, thank you for sharing your powerful journey and your practical wisdom with us today.
Michael, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for this platform, allowing us to come on here and share what we're trying to do and help people.
Yes, I love it. And just even from a personal perspective, I know what real estate deals can do for just the regular American family. And if that is like a mom and three children at home or a dad
Sure.
and a few children at home, there's power in what we can do to help each other. So listeners, if you're ready to start your own journey, absolutely please be sure to visit nomoneymillionaire.com, download David's free digital book, sign up for his newsletter. You will find that it's packed with valuable tips and some mindset tools. And remember, the money set and the mindset, they go together. It's a tool set.
Yes.
And we can all use the camaraderie and the help in the community. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you found value in today's episode, please subscribe to the 5 a.m. podcast and share it with anyone who could benefit from hearing that no money and no excuses can still lead to extraordinary success. Until next time, Michael Clausen encouraging you to rise early, think big, and take those steps that lead to your freedom. And so, with that in mind, please seize your days. Enjoy those sunrises and sunsets and all those beautiful adventures in between. Thanks for watching the show. Just a reminder that you can get all of our resources, other episodes, and read our blog posts at 5ampodcast.com. 5am Podcast is brought to you in part by mkci.ca, a certified member of the Autodesk Developer Network. MKCI helps companies maximize their AutoCAD, Inventor, Navisworks, and other design software investments. Their innovative products like the CommandSys script editor and the Clash Management Suite will streamline your workflow and boost your productivity. Visit mkci.ca today to discover how they can enhance your competitive CAD advantage. That's mkci.ca. Thank you for your support of 5am Podcast. Here's the conversation we have for you next time on the 5am Podcast.
You can ask questions. You can ask them to help you with certain things, but don't rely on your skill set alone. Get people alongside you. If someone is good at doing logos, then say, hey, can you do this logo for me? If someone is good at spreadsheets, say, hey, I've got this issue trying to figure out my budget. Can you help me? So just being open to that and being open to saying, hey, I don't have all the business skills, but I don't want to enter this all, blindly trying to figure this out. Then connect with the community or connect with people in your local. It could be family members. A lot of times family members don't know creative stuff, but they do know business stuff. So sometimes you don't need to find everybody say, oh, buy my album. Maybe they don't need to buy your album. Maybe they need to help you with your spreadsheets. Maybe that's the way they contribute. And people love to contribute.
Is there a framework that you use when you're helping others develop that kind of unique brand identity? And then I guess too, staying authentic to their values of who they are.
Oh, this is so good. Yes, I've been so blessed by seeing the people in our God and Gates community walking this out literally step by step, just like we talked about. So I can talk about my friend Charmaine, who is a brilliant, she has got an idea every single minute. She's actually a brand strategist, but she's also a jazz trumpet player. So she's got this corporate side and she also has this artistic side. And for her, the struggle has been she knows how to build brands for other people, but to decide for herself what her brand was a struggle because, like you said, sometimes you're doing things for other clients, but then to do it for yourself, you have to break this down. So one of the things we helped with her and other clients that I've had is first centering on, I like to go back to what makes you, you. There is something unique. Yes, there's millions of writers. Yes, there's millions of musicians. Yes, there's millions of podcasters. But there's something that is your unique thing. And I actually took this from another book that I read. I love this idea where you actually ask other people. You send an email to about 5 or 10 other people and you say, what is it about me that makes my work or my art or my project or whatever, what do you think my superpower is in this particular area? And for my clients that we just did our accelerator, this one lady got amazing answers. She's an artist, but what people found about her art was she makes people feel courageous and willing to take on new ideas, new goals, new art projects. She gives them courage. That's not your normal artist. That's a superpower that she has that she can then add to her branding and to her platform, that she is a courageous artist. And it gives you this little sense of, hey, I'm not just out here to create something that's like specifically a certain skill. It's also the way that I present it. Another artist I'm thinking of, one of our first coaching clients, she gave us a chance a long time ago. Her name is Nettie, Nedy. I would definitely promote her because I love her to death. I remember when she first came on and we were like, what is it about your music that makes you special? And she's like, well, I don't really know. I love writing and I love performing. But one thing that I really loved is really talking about my story and being bullied as a kid and not wanting to be in that space anymore. So I wanted to let kids express themselves. She's now built an entire platform on helping kids avoid and stand up to bullies. Her music is about that, right? So when people are building a brand, you have to find something that makes you, you, but also connects you to a purpose or a grand thing that is bigger than just the music or just the art itself. And so I think that's what it is. Like even with your community, I can see right now that you definitely have created like a ethos and a mission around the 5 a.m. community, which is bigger than just you yourself. There are people that are connecting the dots of saying, not only do I like what he is, he represents something that I already am.
Yeah.
And so when people do that, then it gets beyond just the, oh, I want to go viral. I want to have the most
Uh-huh.
TikToks or whatever. You're connecting person to person. And one other
Yes.
quick thing I'll say, and I know this is a long answer,
Oh, it's
is take
okay.
advantage of being small. When you're building
Yes.
a brand, it is the most immediate responses and feedback you'll ever get. People that have millions of followers sometimes get 0 comments because everybody assumes that everybody's telling them stuff.
Yeah.
But whenever
Right.
you have those first 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 followers, lean on them. Ask them the questions that what makes me special. And that creates the brand awareness and the brand understanding of who you are that then builds later when you scale and you want to get big and all this kind of sort of things. But however big God makes your platform, it's going to be
Mhm.
based on your authenticity to those first few followers.
Oh man, isn't that the truth? Need morning momentum? 5 a.m. podcast, Wednesdays, 7 a.m. on WDJY 99.1 FM.